timing in Judaism is crucial. We involved many times morning with management of time, and because of that we are in the midst of our long discussion in regard to Pesach, and here the upcoming chapters specifically dealing with the Pesach offering. In general, the whole concept of bringing Passover offering at the Geonic period, this tractate divided to totally two different parts. The first one, they call it at that time the first Pesach, and the second one, they call it in a sense the second one, Pesach Sheni. Later they change it and they wrap it up as one. So many of those discussions, particularly in regard to a Paschal offering, is in this upcoming chapter, and we're going to zoom in today with the time management. Time, because sometimes it's Shabbat and the festival connected to each other. We have a different type of offering. Basically we have 8 type of offering if you go by the way the Torah described. We have the Olah, the sin offering, the Asham offering, guilt one, Shlamim like peace, Thanksgiving, Todah, firstborn offering, the tithe offering, and Paschal offering. So because of that we have 2 categories. One it's called Kodashim Kalim. In a simple way it's a light sacrificial offering, and the other one is the highest, which is Kodshei Kodashim, the sacred of the sacred offering. Now it's a subcategory. Some of them we use domesticated animals, some of them we use others, but it's a procedure that takes place. First part is the slaughtering of the animal, that they use Kodshei Kodashim, the most sacred one, in the north part of the courtyard. And then the other part, which is a light Kodashim, they use it in any place in the courtyard. It was not a specific location, and then they receive that part of the offering in a special, it's called Kli Sharet, special vessel, and then they bring the incense on that altar later. So again, the process is, first is the slaughtering, and then it's called Kabbalah, receiving that part from the basically the throat, the neck of the animal, and then Holacha, to carry that vessel to the altar. And then it was the Hekter, the putting the incense, and later it was a time of eating that Paschal offering. And here there are many times that you go and eating by the owner, but here we're zooming in a Paschal offering. It's also important to know, before we go to the chapter itself, that there are certain circumstances that invalidated the offering and make it in our language blemish or not fitting to use. Anyone knows what the circumstance that causes not to accept? It's called Psulei HaKodashim. Example, if a non-Kohen did the slaughtering, or if the Kohen itself has blemish, if he is contaminated, if he is doing the onenut, during the time of passing of immediate family, if he is not circumcised for some reason. So all of them, it's make it or intoxicated, the offering not accepted. Another one is the Kohen need to do it while he touched the ground. If you remember, we talked about it when we discussed the Mishnah in Zvachim, in Tractate Zvachim, chapter 15. So if he sat while he did this work, or he used the left instead of the right hand, or he stood on the top of something on the floor, etc., all of this make it invalid. So there is a certain process that take place. For example, the thinking. He needs to have the intent, leshem korban. Remember when we did the fixing of that mezuzah and the other day the tefillin, we said leshem kedusha tefillin. It has to be leshem korban, for the purpose of bringing that offering. So if it happens that he did it, for example, Gilbert brought an offering and the Kohen thought about David, okay, or for example he had a different time thinking or different location or not for that purpose, all of that carries special issues with the korbanot. Now when it's come to the Paschal offering, you have another two addition issues. Number one, amen, if the intent or the giving it to people who are not befitting. Anyone knows who is not befitting for Passover, Paschal offering? Someone who is not tameh, is not ritually pure, or someone who does not have brit milah. That's the Torah said. So all of that make it invalid. Or if the owner did not intend to partake of that. For example, they have intent to use it for other purposes. So that's also an issue. So why I'm giving you all this introduction, because that's part of what we're going to have. Another example, the Torah said in Exodus 34 that if a person carry chametz, leavened bread, in his meat, and he is one of the people who involved in chabura, in the group for Paschal offering, is an issue. Why? Because the Rambam tells us in Korban Pesach, part of that process is that everyone needs to be chametz free, leavened bread free. The group divided to three parts. One is enter the temple courtyard to slaughter that offering, and then the door closed in order to do it, and then the other group get in, and then the third one. And at that time they blow their horns and Levi sing the Hallel. That's a part of what we're going to study in 64. And then you have the whole process of eating it, not just to for those who are hungry, but the mitzvah to eat Paschal offering, and that's specific in that time. The last one is the famous Pesach Sheni, the second chance, month later, for people who couldn't make it for some reason, as we said, ritually impure, etc. So then the second part. With that in mind, we go to the Mishnah, chapter 5, page 58. There are three different times to bring a daily offering, Korban HaTamid. We, in a very general term, try to postpone it to the latest part of the day. Why? Because there is issue called Chasheicha, when it's totally dark. And remember, as a framework, David always asks that question, which is שעות זמניות. Dave, can you explain what is שעות זמניות so everyone understand?
Things are done at the correct time, that there's a specific time for...
Every day, it's a different time. Very good, which means since we are in a constant change, the time change between fall, winter, summer, etc., it's שעות זמניות.
It's a proportional hour.
Yes.
So for the day.
Now, every single day we brought a daily offering, which, if you pay attention at the Sidurim, we use the word olat tamid. It's a daily offering. One is in the morning and one is in the afternoon. In addition, they used to bring other offering every single day. Most of the time was either individual offering or sometimes it was a public offering. So with all of that, here is the issue. When it's come to Erev Pesach, the eve of the festival of Passover, we have now a situation that if it's past the Chatzot is everyday change, right? But it's basically, for our understanding, it's a mitzvah of the day. So if it's go to the frame of sha'atayim v'chetzi, 2.5 hours, you're getting close to 9.5 hours. So in Erev Pesach, we have a reason to lehakdim, to make it earlier. Why we need to do it? In order to have shchitat korban Pesach, to slaughter the Paschal offering. So regardless if it's a regular week or if it's Shabbat, we get earlier to 7.5 hours. Meaning, if it's a Friday, if it's Erev Shabbat, we have to make it earlier even more in order to finalize all the process earlier. What does that mean? So we said as follows: Tamid nishchat b'shmone u'mechza v'karev b'tish'a u'mechza. If you count the hours, so again, it's zmaniyot, we talk about 8.5 hours after the sunrise. So we go to that process until the haktara, the putting the incense, which is, remember we said, we take the animal, we open it, we do all the preparations, right? And then we carry it to the altar. So all of that take about an hour. And because of all these process that taking time, so we do in a usual manner up to what? 9.5 hours. So later, the Pnei Yoshua said, later the Gemarrah goes to the specific, why they do it the specific time. But anyway, they said, Be'arvei Psachim, when it's the eve of Pesach, so you have to make it earlier, and use the word plural that Tzlach said because it's also applied to Pesach Sheni, and therefore nishchat b'sheva u'mechza v'karev b'shmone u'mechza bein chol u'vein Shabbat, because you need to have a process which is first is a daily offering and then is a Paschal offering. So we have to make it 1 hour earlier in order to collect all this, so many Paschal offering, so many fellow Jews coming in and bringing the offering. So you need to do all of that before Shki'ah, before the sunset. So even it happens that it's coincide with the time of Shabbat. So in general, Paschal offering supersedes Shabbat. But in a certain situation, so they said ben bechol ben beshabbat. Regardless, we have to make it early. So let's say if it's Friday, so you have an issue that Sliyat Pesach, it's not dochet the Shabbat because it's Friday. So what do? You have to make it 1 hour earlier. So he said Chal erev Pesach liot be'erev Shabbat. So imagine how many you have here, tons of people, and everyone needs to do, right? And it's before the sunset. So nishchat b'shesh u'mechza v'karev b'sheva u'mechza. Now you have to have 1 hour earlier. So you have to have the korban tamid, the daily offering, 6.5 hours. and then to finalize it, the offering in 7.5 hours, which is a combination of both shchita and sliya, slaughtering and then roasting. Pesach acharav, and the Paschal offering, since part of that is roasting it, that's the way the Torah said it. So in order to make it earlier, before the sunset, people needs to eat it while it was roasted. So therefore we have to make everything earlier, and since Pesach is secondary, in a sense you have to do the Tamid first and then you have to do the Pesach, so therefore you have to move all the time earlier to finish everything and wrap up earlier. How do you know the source of the Mishnah that the time of making the afternoon daily offering all year round has to be in what? 8.5 hours. And remember, that's Zmaniyot. So Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi de Amar Kra, because the Torah said in the book of Bamidbar, book of Numbers, chapter 28, in regard to daily offering, that's what we said every morning. Et הכבש אחד תעשה בבוקר ואת הכבש השני תעשה בין 40. You should make 2 offerings, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. That's the Torah words. We derive from that chalkehu, you have to divide the evening, which is about 6 hours, leven shnei aravim, to 2 different time of evenings. So Rashi explained to us it's from the 6 hours vamala and onward, because the ben arbaim, remember this is before the time of having watch, right? So they have to look up, and that's the time that the tzel noteh, that the shadow is getting, the middle of the day, it's moving to the time of darkness. So since it's taking about an hour to being occupied with the offering, so you take the ben arbaim, you take the twilight time, and you divided it leven shtei aravim, to like 2 different evenings. Shtei shaot umechza lekan, which means you take the ben arbaim, which is 5 hours. You have 2.5 hours in one side and 2.5 hours to the other. Shtei shaot umechza lekan v'sha'a achat la'asiyato, which means you take the evening and it's all wrapped up for 8.5 hours, and it starts with what? From Chatzot, for the middle of the day. Now the sun is starting going to the west, and you see the shade going to the east until the time of the sunset, which is 6 hours. And ben ha'arbaim ha'arbayim, erev aravim arbayim. Okay, so it's like we divided the evening to 2 parts. That's the part of the daily offering, that it's an hour. So it means 2.5 hours in one part, 2.5 before completion, then 2.5 hours after, which means the time of the daily offering, it's 8.5 hours.
Is that
until
mincha katana?
Okay, I promise you in a few minutes I'm going to speak about Mishnah Brura and Mincha Ktana, and the opinion between Magen Avraham and Pri Chadash in regard to a different between Sfaradim and Ashkenazim, and Mincha Gdola and Mincha Ktana. You just jumped too earlier, and I knew you're a shrewd, bright man, but just give me a few minutes, I'll go there, I promise. Okay, next. So we said here, Mativ Rava. Rava asked from the continuation of the Mishnah. Be'arvei Pesachim, remember that Tzlach tells us Arvei, it's the 2 Aravim, the Pesach Rishon, Pesach Sheni. Be'arvei Pesachim, Nishchat B'sheva u'mechza, the daily offering is slaughtered from the 7.5 hours. Ve'karev, and they have the final procedure of offering B'shmone u'mechza, from the 8.5 hours. Bein Bechol, Bein B'Shabbat. There's no difference between a daily, secular, daily of mundane offering that we do every day, ben b'Shabbat, v'is al kadatach. And if you tell me that the time of bringing the daily offering, bishmone u'mechza deoraita, What we just said in 8.5 hours, it's biblical. Wait a second. If you tell me that that's a strict biblical time for 8.5 hours, and now you tell me that they're going earlier, so the time of offering is 1 hour in order to wrap up all the many offerings that people have. But according to what Rabbi Shua ben Levi tells us, that the Torah is the one who tells us that it's what? It's 8.5 hours. So even you are under the time constraint, how you change time? It's biblical. So he said, so what we said so far? We see by the Mishnah that we can basically, for better term, we use a daily language, we can play around with time, right? Erev Pesach, 7.5. Erev Shabbat, 6.5. Regular, 8.5. Now they said, wait a second. You tell me that, but just Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi tell me that is a strict time, biblical time. How can you play around with the time? El Amar Rava come and said, no, you can't tell me that is a strict time by the Torah measure. And he said, it's all rabbinic decree. Because if you go by the Torah, mitzvato de tamid mishinatu tzlalei erev. So the prophet Jeremiah said in chapter 6, he said, Oy lanu kifana hayom ki natu tzlalei erev, which means that it's like, again, it's not a time of modern days that you ever watch and you look and you know the exact time. You look up and you measure, and soon you see some examples in Beit HaMikdash. So in the time of the twilight, when you see the beginning of the shade going to the east, that's already an evening, getting to the evening's time. So that's the time of the daily offering, which is getting to the 7th hour, because the sun is going to that direction. Meaning, if you go by the Torah, the mitzvah of having daily offering in the afternoon, it can be in any time, which means from the time that the shade go to the east until the time that the sun is totally set. So it's 6.5 hours, and you go further. Now, my tama. So since today, if you go by the idea that it's not a zman kavua, it's not a total permanent time, we basically go up to the shkia, right? So therefore the sages make it according lefi hatzorech, according to what need. The amarkra, we just said the pasuk ben ha'arbaim. Remember the second et hakeves hasheni ta'aseh ben ha'arbaim, which means me'idna de matchil shimsha lemarav. When you start seeing the sun getting to the west, which means you're getting close to that time, hilkach bishar yemot hashana, therefore in an entire year around, the ikan nedarim unedavot, we have a voluntarily offering that brought in a Beit HaMikdash. People bring it, it's like someone said, upon me this offering, or this non-domesticated animal, it's for offering. So that's you have to bring it before the daily offering, because daily offering is like the concluding part. The Rahmana Amar, the Torah said in regard to morning offering, they said in Leviticus 6, Aleha chelvei hashlamim, which means that's the completion. It's like the end. So they said, V'amar Aleha chelvei hashlamim, Aleha, which is the morning offering, Hashlem kol hakorbanot kulam, which means Shlamim, Rabbeinu Hanel said, is Hashlama, it's the completion. So that is like the completion of the offering. And you should not postpone the daily offering of Ben Arbaim. Me'acharina le'tartei sha'eh. So we go instead of 6.5 to what? To 8.5, which is what? 2 hours. ועבדין עלי בשמונה ומחצה. Now, בערבי פסחים דאיקה פסח אחריו. Now we are the eve of Pesach. It's a great stress time. It's a lot of offering, right? It's Erev Pesach, all the preparation involved. We make the daily offering 1 hour earlier. We make it 7.5 hours. So here you see the Tosfot tells us, I give you the vignette of the Tosfot. The Tosfot said that the real time is 6 hours. It's based on what we learn in Tractate Yomi, page 28, that they said in those days they go by the sun. Why? That's what David asked earlier. If you go until 6 from the morning until Chatzot, so you have the east part, and then you go the half time until the sun go to the west. So now think about Beit HaMikdash. They have those ktalim, those almost diagonal, those moving walls. So now they have issues. Why? Because it's meshupa, it's going not straight, and it's it's kashe le'emod, it's very hard for the Kohanim to measure the exact time. Okay? Imagine that Elliot or David, good morning, right? The Kohanim is in Beit HaMikdash. We wish we talk about the Mashiach.
Yes.
Anyway, so we just talk about Kohanim. So what happened is they're in Beit HaMikdash, and they need to measure the exact time, but there's no watch in those days. So what do? They look outside. Now the wall of Beit HaMikdash it's not going straight, it's going like, how do you say it?
Slanted.
Slanted, thank you. Meshupaim, you call it in Hebrew. So it is slanted. So they look outside. Guess what happened now? It's the middle of the day. So they are not meshuchna, they are not 100% that the sun is going totally to the west part. So they have to measure it accordingly. So that's the issue Tosfot said, based on that Yoma 28, how you measure it clearly. Because if you go by Rashi, so he said it's going by the 6.5 hours. So Rabbi Akiva Iger in Gilyon HaShas and Etzlach too have an issue with this time, or the time of 6 that is Ben Arbaim. Because, again, if you see in the Mishnah Berurah in Ilchot Shabbat, he's dealing with Dinei Musafim, in all the idea of the additional offering. We have nowadays the Musaf, right? Musaf services based on that idea, the timing. Now, here we have a big machloket poskim, big disputation the poskim between Magen Avraham and Pri Chadash. And you see soon there's a lot of application to halacha, because we have mincha, right? So we have a mincha prayer, an afternoon prayer. And we have the idea of Musaf, like in Shabbat, in Rosh Chodesh. Now, the Sfaradim go by the Maran. So it's an issue, because if you go by the Magen Avraham said that it's no such a thing, mincha, because you go by the 6 hour. If you go to 6, he said it's not the right time, you have to repeat the prayer. The Pri Chadash said no, but the Avad it's okay. So it's all based on this disputation. Why? Because the truth is the Sfaradim little by little get to the yeshiva world, the Lithuanian yeshiva world, and they been part of the Ashkenazim in many ways, and there is some influence of Ashkenazim, not always for good in that sense, but that's the reality. So the Sfaradim who go strictly by the Maran, they have an issue with Mincha Gedola. Lechatchila, for sure the Sfaradim prefer to go by the Maran, which is Mincha Ktana, that's Lechatchila. But it's based on this disputation, you see. Now we see here the conclusion. They said, Chal Erev Pesach liot Erev Shabbat. De'i kana metzliato de lo chedach Shabbat. Because remember, you have here all this offering. The Kohanim are overwhelmed. And all these mass of offering. And the idea of eating the Korban Pesach, the Paschal offering, it has to be roasted. And it has to be roasted b'od yom, before the sunset. Because the idea of roasting it, it's not doche Shabbat. It's not supersede the idea of Shabbat. Why? Because you need to do it. It's letzorech hadyot for everyone. So mokminan le'adinei b'shesh u'mechza. So we have to go in all this process to make it earlier. תנו רבנן כסידורו בחול כך סידורו בשבת דברי רבי ישמעאל. רבי עקיבא אומר כסידורו בערב פסח. אוקיי, נדרים או נדבות we do not have on Shabbat. Okay? We don't want to make a shinui with 8 ומחצה, with 8.5. So they said the same way as the daily offering in a regular manner, we have that order the same with Shabbat. That's the Rabbi Ishmael. Which Rabbi Akiva Omer, no. Both Shabbat and Erev Pesach is what? 7.5 hours. So again, for those who just walk in, we're explaining that the time management is crucial. And it's come to Erev Pesach, and all the mess of the preparations involves so much. My ka'amar, what exactly the Braita are telling us? Amar Abaye hachei ka'amar. Abaye said, that's what the Braita are telling us. Kesiduro bechol be'erev ha-Pesach, which means if the daily offering happened during the regular week time, which is what? In 7.5 hours, and offered in 8.5 hours, כך סידורו בשבת בערב פסח, which means we have להקדים ולהצטרף, we have to make it earlier and partake. That's דברי רבי ישמעאל. רבי עקיבא אומר כסידורו בערב הפסח שחל להיות בערב שבת, which is what? 6.5 hours. Why? Think again, think together. It's Erev Shabbat, it's Erev Pesach, Erev Shabbat. It's tremendous stress. We want to have all this roasting tzliya earlier time. So we want to make it before Shabbat. There is concept that we call zrizim makdimim lamitzvot. You know that the Kohanim are always very quick to make things quicker, right? So in order to make it quick, kach siduro b'Shabbat. That's apply also Erev Pesach Shabbat. So because we have to make so much, we're not taking chances, so we go earlier. Umatnit in the Daike, when the Mishnah speaks about what? 7.5 hours, ben bechol ben b'Shabbat, Rabbi Ishmaeli, which means that go by the opinion of Rabbi Ishmael, the Maika Mifligate. When we speak about the hour, which is 6.5 hours, what exactly Rabbi Ishmael Rabbi Akiva dispute? Why Rabbi Ishmael go by the 7.5 hours? Because you think it makes sense, Rabbi Akiva's opinion, to go the 6.5 hours. We have enough time. So they said the big machloket is what proceeding to what, ma kodem lema, what taking precedence before the other, what we prefer first. במוספים קודמים לבזיחים כמפלגי, when we have every Shabbat the additional offering. So the big question is what taking first, if the kvasim, the gold offering of Shabbat preceding the levona that take from the loaf, the lechem apanim. So basically, lechem mutar ba'achila. So you need to make it earlier or the opposite. Rabbi Ishmael savar musafim kodmim levazichim. Avad lehu lemusafim beshesh. So Rabbi Ishmael hold that the additional offering precedes the bowls. So the Kohen needs to make it in a 6 hours because that's the proper time. Ubazichin b'sheva. So he make the bazichin in the 7th hour. Ve'avid lele tamid b'sheva u'mechza. He make the daily part in the 7.5 hours, which is the middle of the 8 hours. Because if you go by the daily offering korban tamid, the Torah said what? Baboker. Now let's learn together something very important concept. When the Torah used the term baboker, what does that mean? Help me.
In the morning?
In the morning, what does that mean? When the Torah used the word baboker.
Before Chatzot?
Okay, let's think together. When the Torah used the term, for example, Vayashkem Avraham baboker, Avraham Avinu did it in the morning. What does that mean?
That was first thing in the morning.
Excellent.
Right when he woke up.
Excellent. So it means every time, remember this rule, every time the Torah used the word baboker, it means try to do it what?
Early as possible, right when you get up in the morning.
Early possible. Next one. When the Torah used the word yom, bayom, what does that mean?
During the day.
Which means you make a me'acharim lechatzot. You go
after
later in the day. Later in the day. So therefore, ובזיחין בשבע ואביד לתמים בשבע ומחצה. רבי עקיבא סבר בזיחין קודם למוספין, בזיחין בחמש, מוספין בשש, ואביד לתמים בשש ומחצה. Since the language of those offering use the word yom, bayom, so therefore you can go by Rabbi Akiva. No, Rabbi Akiva said that the bull precede the additional offering, therefore the Kohen offered the bulls at 5 hours sacrifice, and then the Musafim offering 6 hours, and the daily offering 6.5 hours. Matkif la Rava. So Rava, I have an objection with that, and he said, Mi de Rabbi Akiva, kisidro be'erev Pesach shchalil b'Shabbat ketani. Kisidro be'erev Pesach stam akta. He didn't say specifically Erev Pesach that occurred on Friday. He just said general Erev Pesach. So, El Amar Rava achi ke'amar. כסדרו בחול, כך סדרו בשבת, בערב פסח, which means that you do not make a difference because דברי רבי ישמעאל, because ערב שבת. רבי עקיבא אומר כסדרו בערב פסח, which means that it's 7.5 hours, ומתניתין דקתניא, when the Mishnah said that the daily was offering in the eve of Passover in a 7.5 hours, בין בחול בין בשבת, regardless if it's a weekly or Shabbat. Rabbi Akiva. Now we go over Rabbi Akiva. B'may kamiflegei? What's the real difference? B'michmar bisra kamiflegei. With regard to the possibility that the meat will become warm and spoil before it's roasted. So what do you do now? Rabbi Ishmael savar, if it was the eve of Passover that occurred on Shabbat, so you have the issue of roasting it. What when it's too earlier? Chayshinan lemichmar bisra. We have issue with the meat can be spoiled and rotten. So therefore, you cannot make it earlier. In order not to, so usually we do it make it early in order to expedite this Paschal offering. But if it's a Shabbat, in order to avoid waiting for so long and then it can rotten the meat, so you can't do it. We will not be concerned about the meat become warm and spoil, so therefore it's possible to slaughter the Paschal lamb earlier, even when Pesach Eve occurs on Shabbat. 58b. So the Gemarrah challenged what Rabbi Akiva said. If we are not concerned about the meat become warm and rotten, and then we make the daily offering even earlier. Guess what? We need space of time, so let's go earlier to 6.5 hours. And why we postponed it until the 7.5 hours? Kasavar, the Gemarrah respond, the Rabbi Akiva hold, Musafin kodmin lebazichin. The additional offering has to be earlier than the other, the bazichin, which is the part of the levona and the loaf bread, the lechem apanim. Avilu lo musafin beshesh, the Kohen, what he do? He make the additional offering in 6 hours, which means that's the proper time, and then bazichin besheva, 7 hours, the bazichin v'avid letamid b'sheva u'mechza, and he make the sacrifice of daily offering at 7.5 hours. Matkif la Rabba Barula. Rabba Barula have issue with it. Midi kisidro bechol kasdo b'shabbat b'erev Pesach Rabbi Ishmael. That's what we said earlier. Katane kasdo b'shabbat stam aktani. It's not to say specifically in the time that it's Shabbat and the eve of Passover. So Rabba Barula hachi katane kisidro bechol de alma. Just a regular week, which is what? 8.5 hours. Kach sidro b'shabbat de alma, which means a regular Shabbat, even we do not have on Shabbat a נדרים ונדבות, right? They're voluntarily offering. דברי רבי ישמעאל רבי עקיבא אומר, כסדרו בפסח, בערב פסח דעלמא, which is regular eve of Passover, which means it happens in a regular day. It's what? 7.5 hours. כך סדרו בשבת דעלמא, which is regular Shabbatot, which means Rabbi Akiva, both Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Ishmael do not have any disputation in regards to the time of daily offering when it's occurred on the eve of Pesach. Only one, the whole year around, the time of Shabbat. Umatnitin dektani ben bechol ben beshabbat. The Mishnah that said that daily offering is slaughter with the eve of Passover, what, in the 7.5 hours, apply regardless if it's a weekday or Shabbat. Divrei hakol, it's both Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Akiva, b'maika miflegei. So what's really the disputation between Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Akiva? Bigzerat nedarim undavot kamiflegei. Do we have to have this daily offering when it's occurred in Shabbat, make it earlier, and we should do it the same in the regular week? So in other words, you cannot bring a nedarim and nedavot afterward. Rabbi Ishmael savar gazrinan Shabbat atu chol. Rabbi Ishmael holds that we issue a decree for Shabbat due to weekday, which means if it happened during the week, the sacrifice of the daily afternoon offering is postponed until 8.5 hours of the day. Why? Because the nedarim and nedavot must be sacrificed before the daily offering. But it happened the same rule on Shabbat because we don't want to have any distinction. And Rabbi Akiva savar lo gazrinan, we don't have any issue of this decree. So the Gemarrah said, which means, therefore in Shabbat, what we do, we're making all this daily offering to what? 7.5 hours. Ilo gazrinan, if we don't put the decree to make the daily offering on Shabbat because of the voluntarily one for daily, ne'avde b'shesh u'mechza. We just said that zrizin makdimin lamitzvot, right? That they like every morning we see Gilbert here at 5:45, right? They do things earlier, they quick things, right? So why we postpone it to what? To 7.5 hours? Kasavar musafin kodmin lebazichim. Because he hold the additional offering preceding bazichim. Musafin בשש, ובזיחין בשבע, ואביד לתמיד בשבע ומחצה. So now, if we wrap it up, we have 3 different directions in this disputation between Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Akiva. Abaye and Rava hold that the disputation is the time of the daily offering in Erev Pesach that occurred on Shabbat. According to Abaye, Rabbi Ishmael hold that in that circumstance the daily offering is brought what is 7.5 hours. Rabbi Akiva hold that is in a 6.5 hours. And the foundation of the disputation, if we proceed bazichin to musafim or not. According to Rava, Rabbi Ishmael hold that daily offering is slaughtered in 8.5 hours. Rabbi Akiva hold that is in a 7.5 hours. And the big question is, remember what happened, that the meat become rotten and spoiled. And why? Because you wait so long before you roasted the meat. Imagine how you have a mass offering and you're waiting, and meanwhile all this meat rotten. Why? Because you have the time in between before it's fully roasted. So according to Rabbi Ula, the disputation between Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Akiva apply to all year round on those Shabbatot. Rabbi Ishmael hold that daily offering is slaughter on Shabbat the same as a weekly day, which is 8.5 hours. Rabbi Akiva hold that it's in a slaughter in a 7.5 hours. And the foundation is, the key disputation is, should we sometimes postpone the daily offering on Shabbat because of those voluntarily offering that comes doing the week around. Meitive. So now we ask a question in regard to daily offering. Tamid, the offering of daily offering, כל השנה כולה קרב כהלכתו. All year round we offer this daily sacrificial offering according to its law, which means regular way, which is נשחט בשמונה ומחצה וקרב בתשע ומחצה. You slaughter it in 8.5 hours and you bring it to the final offering in 9.5 hours. ובערב פסח you have an issue, right? So what do you do? נשחט בשבע ומחצה וקרב ושמונה מחצה. You make it an hour earlier. חל להיות בשבת. What you do it according to Erev Pesach is according to Shabbat. So what do you do? So כחל להיות בשני בשבת, the same as it happened on Monday. So it means Monday is just, as Rashi said, is just as an example. You the same rule, which is according to Rabbi Ishmael, you go by what? 7.5 hours. Rabbi Akiva said, if the Erev Pesach happened on Shabbat, כסדרו בערב הפסח. It's like the arrangement of Eve of Passover when it's advanced to 6.5 hours of the day. So now the Gemarrah asks, Bishlama le'Abaye nicha. According to Abaye we understand, which means Rabbi Ishmael hold that the Eve of Pesach that occurred on Shabbat is the same as the weekly day. That's the way Abaye said in the first Braita. So we understand, but now according to Rabbi Akiva, that they said that it's the same as Erev Shabbat. So so it's fine. But Ela Rava that hold the same as Rabbi Ishmael, that Erev Pesach that occurred on Shabbat, the offering, daily offering, is slaughtered in 8.5 hours and finalized offer is slaughtered in 8.5 hours and offered in 9.5 hours. So we all, because we concerned about the meat that get rotten, kashya. So you see that it's a contradiction, because in one place you said 7.5, and the other one said that you slaughter 8.5 and then finalize it to 9.5. Amar lecha Rava lo teima. You don't ask. You don't have an issue here. Why? Because if it happens on Shabbat, kechal is the same that Eve of Passover basheni b'Shabbat. Elaima kesheni the Shabbat the alma. You may say like an ordinary Monday. So it means that if the Eve of Passover occurred on Shabbat, no changes introduced. The daily offering is sacrificed at the time that is sacrificed on ordinary weekday, which means that 8.5 hours of the day. So that means meitivei. So we ask, chal liyot b'Shabbat. If the eve of Passover occurred on Shabbat, so the daily offering is kesidro kol hashana kula, which is 8.5 hours, and we don't make it because of offering of Pesach earlier. Divrei Rabbi Ishmael, you're not concerned according to Rabbi Ishmael that the meat will be rotten. Rabbi Akiva omer kesidro be'erev Pesach de alma, which means 7.5 hours. Bishlama leRava nicha. We understand the Rava the way that we just explained. Abaye, that he holds the same as Rabbi Ishmael, that the eve of Passover is 7.5 hours, the same as a weekly day, kashya. So it means that it's a contradiction. One he says 7.5 and one he said 8.5. Amar lach Abaye lo teima. You don't ask. Kesidro kol hashana ela ema kesidro kol hashanim kulam, which means that it's 7.5 hours. Divrei Rabbi Ishmael. Rabbi Akiva omer kesidro be'erev Pesach shchal להיות be'erev Shabbat, which is what? 6.5 hours. So what we understand, that no other korban doing all year round can be offered after tamid shel ben arba'in. So also you don't bring any offering before tamid shel shachar, which means in that sense the two tmidim is like the borderline of offering. Okay, so how do you know? Bring me the source. Tanu Rabbanan. Minayin shelo yeh davar kodem tamid shel shachar. How do you know that nothing happened, or in offering, Rashi said, before the morning offering? Talmud lomar, that's what we said every day from the Vaikra, from Leviticus chapter 6. וביער עליה הכהן עצים בבוקר וערך עליה עולה. What is that? וערך עליה עולה, that prepared the עולה offering, which means that's the very beginning of the morning, of the Kohen preparation, nothing before that. My Talmuda, Amarava ha'ola. they use the hey, which means Ola Rishona. That's the first one only. ומניין שאין דבר קרב אחר תמיד של בין הארבעים. How do you know that nothing happened after the afternoon offering? תלמוד לומר, והקטיר עליה חלבי השלמים. That the Torah said in continuation of the line that he brought the shlamim, the completion offering. So Rashi here asked a question I wrote in my book, ביאורי הכלומר ורש"י. רש"י asked, התמיד דקאי הסייפא דקאו ואחרי כמר וקטיר על העולה הזאת, כלומר אחרי חלבי השלמים. The Torah said the fire on that altar לא תכבה. So in a simple way, ביער עליה, which means on that fire. וערך העולה וקטיר עליה חלבי השלמים. You see how many times עליה. So Abaye explained that they use the word alea, so it means after the offering of the afternoon offering. And Rashi used the word klomar to say that alea chutz bimena, excluding that one, which means you need to bring another one in addition to the chelvei hashlamim, the fat of the completion offering. So alea, it's in addition to alea, Rashi used the word klomar to say that it's the following, the subsequent one, that specifically chelvei shlamim followed and nothing else. You're welcome to read it in the book. I elaborate on that. Anyway, so they said, "My Talmuda." How do you derive from that? Amar Abaye, alea shlamim velo al chaverta shlamim. Abaye said that specifically for the peace offering, which means the voluntarily vow and free will offering be sacrificed throughout the day, but peace offering may not be sacrificed upon, which means after its counterpart, which is a daily afternoon offering. Matkif la Rava, so Rava asked, Eima, you should say shlamim, peace offering, hu de lo nakriv, that we must not sacrifice after the daily afternoon offering. Ha'olot nakriv, but the burn offering we may sacrifice. Why? Because we have these derivations referring to peace offerings. So how do you know that nothing else follow it? Hashlamim, as we said, use the hay, peace offering upon it. So since you use the hay, alea hashlem, hashlem meaning completion, completes, kol hakorbanot kulam, that you have all the others sacrificed, which means you do not use the tamid shel ben arba'im, but you do it only tamid shel shachar and not after tamid shel ben arba'im. So, which means you don't do lechatchila any other. And he said here, according to Tosefta and others, all the others offering that someone brought, even b'diavad, it's no longer valid, it's pasul. But there is a Tospot in Menachot 49b that express it and explain all the details. So we don't have enough time, but the key point is that after the slaughter, the tamid of Ben Arbaim, you can bring anything else. But again, I really urge you to read Menachot, page 49b, for all the details involved with this. Everybody should know it. It's not a secret. You can't text while you're doing a sacrificial offering in the base of Mikdash, right? No cell phone and no text. Anyway, Rambam, Hilchot Midin Musafim, chapter 1. Zman Shchitat HaTamid. The time of slaughtering the daily afternoon offering began when it was clear that the day has begun to progress toward evening, approximately half an hour after midday. The daily afternoon offering was ordinarily slaughtered at the 8.5 hours into the day, which is 2.5 hours after midday, and then sacrifice at 9.5 hours. The arrangement left time for the rest of the individual and communal services brought on the day to be sacrificed before the daily afternoon offering. So now, when we talk about the Pesach, the Passover Eve, when the Paschal lamb was sacrificed after the day offering, the ladder was slaughtered and the 7.5 hours into the day, and the sacrifice an hour later. Think about the mass production of the offering. When Passover Eve occurred on Shabbat Eve, the slaughter of the daily offering was advanced to 6.5 hours into a day, in order to ensure that there will be sufficient time to do tzliya, to roast the Paschal lamb before Shabbat. Now, how about musafin and bazichin? We have those korbanot, additional offering. So this is the Lechem Mishneh on the Rambam Ilchot Midim Musafim, chapter 4. We said is that the two bowls of the offering, the musafin bazichin, that accompany with the showbread, lechem apanim, were burned on Shabbat together with the additional offering, prior to the libation of wine that accompanied the additional offering. And that's the way Abaye said it here. That's the Gemarrah and Yomi dealt with that. And basically the Kesef Mishneh have a lot of discussion in regard to this offering. Anyway, another halacha I would like to share with you is the Hakravat Tamid b'Shabbat. We have a daily offering, but when it happened on Shabbat, so the Lechem Mishneh said that the daily afternoon offering is sacrificed on Shabbat at 8.5 hours, just as during the week. But the Rambam ruled the way that Rava disagree with Abaye, which means that usually the disputation go by the Rava. He also not accept the opinion of Rabbi Bar-Ula. Basically the whole idea is that the daily afternoon offering sacrifice Shabbat at 8.5 hours. And if you want to see more, it's the Rambam Ilchot Midin Musafim, the first chapter.